Eoghan Corry, journalist, author, broadcaster from Air and Travel Magazine, joins me by phone. Eoghan, good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Can you hear me okay?
Perfect, yes.
Oh, perfect, that's grand. First up, why did JWT go bust after 60 years in business?
Largely COVID. They spent the last year paying out refunds, as a lot of travel companies have, and getting no income in. So they struggled through. They were also in a dispute over an insurance scheme. Most of your listeners will be very familiar with continuity of business and the problems that businesses have, claiming that dispute is ongoing. But their licence was due up in May, and they needed to be covered by the bond to make sure all their customers got protected. So yesterday they called it a day.
And do they not get pandemic payments that might have kept them afloat, no?
Yes, the CRSS has been keeping people, the employees are about 35 of them all on the PUP, but that doesn't cover refunds. That doesn't cover this notion, this business that you've taken money off people. They're all looking for it back. Sometimes you have to go through the expense of relocating it once. A lot of people transferred their holiday bookings forward and then discovered they couldn't take them.
Were you saying that by and large their customers would be older? Is that right?
It's very interesting. Their demographic will be the oldest in the business. The reason is that Joe Walsh built his empire on pilgrimages. Some of the listeners would be old enough to remember if you were flying to Spain, you'd stop in Lourdes and offload people first and then fly on to Spain. But when Joe Walsh died in 1995, iconic figure, not just in travel, but across Irish consumer culture, it's a very well-known name. They sold the bucket and spade business, all that family stuff, all that Mallorca, Canary Islands, onto a company that eventually became TUI Ireland. And the family, the three sons, kept the pilgrimages. Yeah. There are about 35,000 pilgrimages out of Ireland every year, Neil. They're still important in travel, but as you might imagine, they're being scaled down. That's another thing that contributed to it. Things like the charters from Corry that would have been a regular every year, they're more or less at an end now because the numbers have come down. But there's still 35,000 of them. They're an older demographic. It's a complicated process getting their money back. It's even more complicated if you've pushed forward a pilgrimage book for last year to 2021 or 2022. And it's going to be quite interesting because a lot of it is done by group leaders, by diocesan leaders, the Catholic bishops.
Yeah.
They don't issue very many statements about travel. They issued a statement about it last night. Getting the refunds back to people is going to be way more complicated than with a tech-savvy audience.
Okay, so it was primarily the pilgrimage building. You said 35,000. In its heyday, what was the highest amount of pilgrims per annum? Was it twice that?
It would have been close to twice that. Interestingly enough, what grew was not that the pilgrimages, fell off that badly. It's just that the other side of the travel industry grew. In the time when we were doing 65,000 to our four main pilgrimage sites, the entire Irish travel industry would just be about double that now. What
was it? Lourdes, Fatima, Medjugorje, and where?
Holy Land is another, and Rome. Remember Rome?
Yeah.
There's a place called Netuna, which is a beach, and it's near the suburbs of Rome. It's not a place anyone would go for a beach holiday, but it's very important because when they were running the pilgrimages to Rome, Joe Walsh had this great idea. We'll do 1 week in Rome, and we'll do another week in Netuna. And of course, people, in rural Ireland wouldn't have, they'd regard it as a bit sort of expensive and a bit sort of splashy to go on a beach holiday, but they were very happy to put one on at the end of the pilgrimage. It's really important younger listeners probably don't get it. My Auntie Mary Ellen's only trip out of Ireland was to Lourdes. There's an entire generation that their only travel, their only experience of an aircraft was those.
But the younger generation, surely, I'm not saying all of them, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but surely they wouldn't really have an appetite for pilgrims, would they? Pilgrimages?
No, their pilgrimages are to places like Ibiza.
There you go. Club Tropicana, where the drinks are free. So, just on the latest announcement that we're expecting tomorrow, because quite an amount of your concentration in business is Irish travel within the country, isn't it? We're looking at inter-county travel after the bank holiday weekend in June. Would you go along with that?
The domestic market is really on trepidation here, and I'll tell you why, Neil. They were expecting some sort of summer, obviously there'll be displacement, people cannot travel. They expected a reasonably good home holiday summer. They did have a good one, but it was short. and it also was problematic. We have the capacity for bouncing an entire county or a part of a county in and out of lockdown at very short notice. So they're Laois and Offaly, not holiday destinations, they got no notice. Donegal got 72 hours notice. So all the business owners of Ireland will be looking at the proposals, maybe June, and more likely July. Everybody's thinking August, we're definitely moving. But what happens if you've hired the staff, if you've gone into all of the infrastructural stuff about table spacing and hand sanitizer and entrance and one-way systems, and you're now told you can't open, haven't gone to that expense?
But he'll tell us tomorrow, surely.
Well, they can tell us when we're scheduled to open. But the real issue, the confidence issue that the industry has to face is, will we be told at very short notice the numbers are going the wrong direction in a particular part of Ireland, and everything you've invested in is now shut down, and you're refunding. Everyone is giving you money. It's cheaper to keep your hotel closed and not hire the staff, and people are waiting. And one of the things your programme has picked up from the listeners is the cost of home holidays, the bookings. The reason is that the demand is very high. Obviously, there's people are reluctant for international travel, although I haven't given up on international travel, but the supply is down because so many people have decided maybe it's not worth opening. I'm not going to put it into the market at this stage. Now, there are exceptions. There are regional exceptions. Dingle, Kinsale, Galway all did really well last summer, and they're much more confident about the summer ahead. The self-catering sector, that's really made for post-COVID travel because you've got family units separated from each other. But right across the industry, they're haunted by the prospect of bouncing in and out of lockdown at peak season and not being able to cover their costs.
You see, he said at the weekend that when we open different things at different stages, we are opening them to never close them again, or words to that effect. Now, for somebody who might have come late to the programme this morning, what's being anticipated at the moment is that tomorrow he will announce that on the 7th of June, hotels and B&Bs will open and we'll be able to go outside of our county to wherever we want. That will include, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong here, outdoor dining and outdoor drinks.
When we open, we stay open was a very important statement. But you've got to remember, Neil, that we had Micheál Martin at 1 o'clock on Sunday saying one thing, and the Taoiseach within 2 hours saying something a little bit different. The hotelier I was talking to this morning, he's 4 hotels, he's 1 open, he's just shoveling anybody that wants a room, usually they're all essential travel business, into that one. He says, I'm not opening the other 3 until it's quite clear that I'll be able to cover the cost of hiring all the staff. And that break in confidence, it's not going to be restored by one phrase like, when we open, we stay open.
So you think that there could be a chance that if the numbers reverse again, that there'll be another lockdown? Do you think it would be... But I don't even know why I'm going into this, because this is all supposition, really.
Okay, let's cut to the chase here, Neil. We don't know what the numbers will do. But what we need from the government, or what the sector needs from the government, if I can speak for them this morning, is that they need some sort of signal that it's not going to be short-term, panic-stricken reaction to trends or to medical advice or conflicting medical advice. They need something that they can count on that will cover their costs. And that hasn't been forthcoming because the policies seem to be almost arbitrary, and we don't know what the numbers will do, because the reaction to any change in numbers, will there be notice given? Will there be a 2-week lead-in, which the European Union is...
Okay, just move around a bit. The phone line is just breaking up a little bit. I did get... a listener did an awful lot of work on behalf of the programme there recently, who said they were looking for a weekend away as a staycation, because I'm sure the government will only be promoting stay at home. I'm not sure if you've seen the prices, and they gave me prices for Kerry, and they also gave me prices for Galway, where they said 1 to 2 nights in Galway, Westport and Kerry is equivalent to a week's holiday abroad. And some of the examples were hotels in Killarney, where one was charging for 2 nights in July €1,000 for 2 nights. There was another one then, a second one, 1,080. There was one in Tralee charging 1,000. Another hotel in Killarney, 887. Ahado Heights, for instance, came in at 2,394. There was hotels in Westport that were charging 700 and 800 for 2 nights. Like, it's insane, isn't it? These kind of prices for 2 nights in a hotel bedroom.
Very simple explanation, Neil. The demand is way up and the supply is very much lower than it would be if we knew what was happening. The number of hotels that have gone into the market is not the total number of rooms that we'd have delivered in a year like 2019.
But he tried to rent. I know, yeah, but he tried to rent a house in Galway for a night, €1,291 per night. Are these the exception, do you think?
It's not that they're the exception. What's on the market are the people who've committed, and the supply and demand rule will it works. It's the same. It works in travel all over the world. If you've got a very high demand and a very small supply, the supply is artificially low, Neil, because people are not putting their rooms onto the market until they're sure that they can pay for the staff for having done so.
No, but these are actual ads, for instance. Like, some of them are celebrating the fact that, 2 nights, the end of July, €807 for 2 nights. Like, that's nothing to celebrate, is it?
It's what the market will bear, and that's, as I said, it's the supply is artificially low. What should happen to solve the price problem is that we get a very clear signal that we're going to open and stay open, like the rhetoric is coming from the politicians, and more rooms come on the market, more houses come on the market, all of that. The demand is going to be quite different, because that'll be really determined on how much international travel is allowed. It'll be later in the cycle before we know that.
I know you're going to say that, but if hotels, for instance, know, or if Airbnb knows that people aren't going to be able to travel out of the country for the greater part of this summer, they are going to put their prices up, aren't they? It's inevitable that they will. It's capitalism.
Capitalism is you charge what the market will bear. Now, are people riding it? I don't think so, because the number of rooms that are put onto the market is going to be higher when everybody realises what's happening, and the prices would settle. I mean, it's very hard to compare. Our Irish product tends to be a little bit premium because it's very dependent, particularly Killarney would be very dependent on high spending American market. If you look for bargains, you don't go to Saint-Tropez internationally. You find them, and the bargains will emerge. And some of them, they say, are there. I haven't been able to find them myself. But as I said, the demand is high, and the supply is artificially low because of the number of people who have yet to decide
whether they will open
the marketplace,
whether they'll open or whether they'll open all of their rooms. I understand what you're saying, but you do know, and I have evidence of this as well, that Airbnb is flying. I mean, this radio program is getting contacted all the time, and I meet people who are telling me that they have Airbnb all booked already, and many of them are heading to West Cork and Kerry this weekend to Airbnbs. They're taking the gamble of even crossing the county bounds. What are your thoughts on that? They're taking houses.
We're not in the business of telling anyone to do anything illegal, but if you were to look, take Airbnb and self-catering and other sectors, like a really good sector is the boat hire and the Shannon. High-spending Germans usually occupy all of those. They were available to Irish people at lower cost last year. But those 3 sectors, Airbnb, self-catering, boat hire, they're the ones that are going to thrive in the post-COVID environment, because you're away from the crowds and you've got family units staying together and holidaying together. That really has been one of the few upsides of the whole the disaster that has been COVID for the hospitality industry. And it could be, as your hard-working listener, that's amazing work ferreting out the prices, but it could be, as your hard-working listener found out, that self-catering is charging a little bit more because they can get away with it. But the reality is that, if you're all around the world, self-catering, it's going to be a year for them. And as it is for activities that are outdoor-based rather than the big stadium, people standing shoulder to shoulder, and Temple Bar tourism that we were used to before COVID.
Okay, well, let's see what the announcement on that with regards to Micheál Martin is tomorrow. Whatever he gets from Neffet and decides to do in, after the June bank holiday weekend. But with regards to international travel, do you have a crystal ball on that? And will that be vaccine related? Will it be a digital cert or what?
All of those things are in play, and I don't have a digital ball. What I'm looking at is people who had bookings for May, transferring them forward. That's what the industry are telling me. They've moved them mostly to end of June, but July and June are still ropey. The real forward bookings are being shifted into August.
Okay.
The other thing that's really important is that the aviation industry has kept its shape, Neil. All those flights are still in the system. Now you can see, our Dublin to Barcelona, the service completely cancelled until May. You can see Ryanair, Aer Lingus nibbling away at the routes, but the full inventory is still in there for July, August, September. Now, July might be early in the cycle. I think August, September, October is where we're looking at.
But do you think that those, say, in August, do you think that those in August will have to have their vaccines, the full vaccines?
The way Europe has looked at this is Southern Europe is very enthusiastic about this green certificate, which means vaccinated or tested, but mainly the member states will each interpret that their own way. Northern Europe not as enthusiastic, but certainly when we reach levels of vaccination that are 60-70% of the population, the authorities will start looking at opening up international travel and getting the aircraft flying again, because connectivity, which is not really about holidays but depends on them, is very so important to all the European economies, especially the southern ones. The northern ones a little bit slower on this, and France, being France, sitting in the middle and still making up its mind. But that's the international trend on it. Very interesting that they're talking about allowing vaccinated Americans into Europe. That's the European Commission announcement. The real problem here is from the beginning, the European Commission has said things and allowed the member states to go their own way. Yeah. And Ireland has been one of the most, one of the ones that has dragged its heels.
Yeah, because he said it's something to do with civil liberties, whether or not you could only allow people with the COVID digital cert to travel. Like, how could he stop them? Like, for instance, Spain is opening to overseas holidaymakers from June under the COVID digital health certificate scheme. Like, what would stop could an Irish person get a COVID digital health cert? Is it European led or what?
We don't know the shape of that, but certainly what's happening is the airlines have already introduced it. Ryanair is an app where you can load your testing information and your vaccination information already.
So if you could do that, how could the government...
It's done at state level.
It's not at state level, but if Ryanair do it, who would actually stop you?
Okay, what we've been doing here, Neil, is using local legislation. We haven't been able to enact anything to stop people travelling internationally. What we've seen is the Gardaí on the approach roads to the airport saying, is your journey necessary under you can't travel more than 5 kilometres legislation. That's what we've been using, and that's we're one of the few countries to do that. The right to travel has not been curtailed by other countries, by anybody else, and there are big legal questions both at European level and at local challenges, whether using our local legislation we have been doing that. There is a civil liberties issue, and it's another important issue, and that most people are everybody's going to get vaccinated is going to be above a certain age. The family holiday business, which is really important for Southern Europe, we can't have is saying that we can't have a situation where people, parents and grandparents are allowed on board and children are not.
I know that, but say for individuals who, like if somebody has been fully vaccinated, what I want to know is in June, if somebody has been fully vaccinated and there are flights to Spain, and who's going to stop them from going on their holidays vaccinated and coming back? They won't have to go into a quarantine hotel. They won't have to isolate at home.
We're back to the situation last summer when all it is advice. It's not illegal, by the way, to travel to Spain. It's not illegal. What we've seen is the 5 kilometre legislation being used. Spain is not a red list country, nor is Portugal. They're not going to be on the red list because that's the way. If France is on it and Italy is on it, but Spain and Greece, other holiday destinations, are not. So it's not actually illegal. What people have to weigh up is the public advice that has come from the government here saying that non-essential travel is not advisable and is bad. And that was the bits of legislation and the things like the using the 5-kilometre legislation and the mandatory hotel quarantine have actually changed that or changed the perception of that. But the core advice, as it was last summer, remains unchanged. Okay. Don't engage in non-essential travel. It's not illegal, but we're being asked as an honour system not to do so. Okay,
I see Ryanair have just posted up on their website that people should not book with online travel agents, that they should only book through Ryanair. Don't book with the likes of Love Holidays. Don't book with company I booked with and lost a considerable amount of money with them, Kiwi.com and Opodo. They're saying they're third party and we don't have any agreements with regards to them, in the sense that if flights are cancelled or anything happens, you'll only get money back through Ryanair. Have you thoughts on that?
Very controversial. There's absolutely no doubt that the big international online operators, and you mentioned Love Holiday, lots of refunds by Ryanair didn't get back to the customer because they didn't have the customer details. One of them, Kayak, started charging people €100 extra to put them ahead in the queue for the Ryanair refund without any basis for that. But there is one thing Ryanair have not got right, is that there is a huge difference between a major online tour operator like Love Holiday and like Kayak and your local travel-based travel agent with whom they used to deal. They've had the travel agents used to sell Ryanair flights within their system under a good Corkman, Kenny Jacobs, signed the deal back in 2015. Now, since COVID, Ryanair have reverted to all travel agents are bad. And one of the things that has really damaged Irish travel agents is, in some cases, they've already paid refunds for Ryanair flights and have not been able to get the money back from Ryanair. Ryanair is absolutely right. Don't book through a third party. Go straight to your website and don't go through a big online tour operator and give a margin to someone in Connecticut or whatever.
Well, I know that.
When it comes to the local travel agent, they really, I would love to see them engaging and repairing a huge breach of trust and a breach of relationship.
Just very finally, just before I let you go, and there are questions coming in all of the time, but this is actually one of my own. I was talking to somebody recently.
Happy to take them.
I was talking to somebody recently in business in Cork. You're aware the Cork airport will close for 10 weeks for essential maintenance on the runway. I was told that the budget given for that job was 30 million to the DAA, that they didn't use up the whole budget, that they will only use something in the region of maybe 10 million of it, or maybe perhaps 15. But that if they had spent it properly and spent another 5 million, for instance, they could have done the work at night and brought in the equipment to allow them to do it at night. That's one point. The other point that was made to me, that the closure of the runway in Cork for that 10-week, or the closure of the airport for 10 weeks, will cost the Cork region €300 million in lost revenue. Any thoughts on that?
It had to be done. It was scheduled to be done a little bit later in the cycle.
The accusation is they penny pinched on it, though, and could have done it by nights by spending a little bit more of the funding they had.
And the equation of that, and I'm not making any apologies for the DA and for Cork Airport and the way they worked out the logistics of this, but if Cork Airport is operating, most of Europe is down to 65% of their capacity. Ireland is down to 85%. Cork has lost even more. It's operating at a very, very skeletal level. So what the equation, and what presumably, without knowing what went on in the boardroom, presumably the equation was the extra money versus the actual disruption when flight levels are at such a historic low.
But they won't be at a low in September.
Yes, that's the anticipation was that it wouldn't be at a low at all in 2021. But they brought it forward. They've made their calculation on the basis of what they see happening in international aviation, and whether it will recover, how quickly it will recover. Let's say the green light goes on in June or July, how recovered will it be in September? They're all the calculations they have to make. And without, as I say, not without knowing what goes on in the boardroom, I'd imagine that's a factor in the decision not to do things at night. Dublin Airport has run into all sorts of problems with its own runway project.
Did they do work at night? Didn't they and Shannon do work at night?
Absolutely, and the whole idea was to get everything done at night time, because everything was planned at 2019 when the airport was bursting at the seams. Getting construction traffic in and out of an airfield site is difficult. You have to go through all the same security.
I know, but my point is but my point was for 5 million extra, they could have done it at night and not cost the Cork region 300 million in lost revenue. That's my point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the question is doing it by paying the extra 5 million to do it by day, does it balance versus the amount of traffic you will be handling then? That's, as I said, I'm not in the boardroom making that decision, but that's explaining the way the process would work in an airport without specifically knowing what went on in that boardroom.
Okay, I'm just mentioning these. Won't have much time with them. Just about to book flights for September to Spain, waiting on a vaccine. Am I doing the right thing to book now, says Kay?
Absolutely. You're going to get your money back if you're with Aer Lingus. Ryanair haven't transferred the full refund forward, but I would imagine if the circumstances are that September is as locked down as we are now, you're going to get your money back, and that's the key to taking a risk for all of these flight decisions.
What about if I fly to England fully vaccinated, do a test, do I still have to quarantine? The answer to that is no, isn't it? No quarantine if you're vaccinated.
Not in the English direction. On return, you do your quarantine at home. It's not mandatory hotel quarantine.
Not if you're vaccinated, though.
Well, the vaccination isn't legislated for at all. It's actually peripheral to the whole. It's being discussed, but the reality is that whether you're vaccinated or not, you still have to do your self-isolation when you arrive in Ireland, Neil. And extraordinarily, vaccinated people arriving from Dubai are being put into mandatory hotel quarantine. That's quite a shock for people who come in from one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. In
the sense that you can still transmit the virus even if you're vaccinated.
Well, there's a separate health debate on all of that, but you can imagine the arguments that are going on in the airport when people arrive vaccinated and are told you have to do mandatory hotel quarantine. Okay, covered a lot of ground. You earned your stripes this morning, Eoghan. Thanks for taking the calls as always. Always a huge pleasure, Neil. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Eoghan Corry. Lines open at 1850 104 106. I hope that clarifies an amount of issues with regards to both domestic and international. Back after 10. The Neil Prendiville